And where and how we get our insurance in many ways determines what kind of care we can afford. For about half of Americans, 49% of us, where we get our insurance is through our jobs or through a family member's job. Your job decides your insurance plan, and either the insurer or your company itself decides what tests and treatments they're willing to pay for. And if there's something that the bean counters won't approve, you either pay for it yourself or, I guess, skip the treatment or the drug or the test. Not a good idea. And how you pay for that insurance is premiums. They come right out of your paycheck. You probably don't even pay much attention to them. And your company pays a portion of your premium that you don't even see. And until you actually need health care, you probably don't think too much about that insurance. But the reason that your premiums and your copays are pretty reasonable is that the pools of customers who buy that insurance are really, really huge. 49% of Americans works out to 156 million people as of 2017, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. 156 million people who get their insurance through work. And they're pooled in these big groups among the major insurance companies. And each pool basically buys in bulk and gets decent prices for care. For 7% of Americans, about 20.5 million people, it's the opposite story. They buy their own insurance as individuals or small companies. And so they pay both the premiums you see and the employer ones that you don't see. Think freelancers or people who own really small businesses. They don't have a big group to negotiate for them or an employer to share costs. So they see all the costs themselves. Before Obamacare, they could be sold cheapo insurance that looks good until you show up at the doctor and they're like, what am I supposed to do with this? With Obamacare, they can qualify for a subsidy to help them ease the burden. Now, the two other big pools of insured people are on Medicare and Medicaid. 14% of Americans, about 43 million seniors, are covered by Medicare, the most popular form of insurance in America, according to Kaiser's polling. 83% of Americans see Medicare favorably, about 7 points higher than how private insurance polls. And 21%, or about 65 million people, are covered by the other offshoot of the Social Security Act of 1965, Medicaid, which covers mostly lower-income people. Now, Medicare in particular is not just popular, it's also really efficient. Instead of a bunch of risk pools based on employers or state individual markets, Medicare takes all 43 million seniors and puts them into one big giant group where just one entity pays the hospitals and the doctors and the bills, Uncle Sam. That's the literal definition of single payer. One payer pays the federal government. Medicaid is more like 50 single payers since it's paid for by the federal government and the states. And the states determine a lot about what Medicaid will cover. So whether you live in a Democratic state or a Republican one might determine whether you get great benefits or they try to slap a work requirement on you or cut your benefits. Now, if you think about Obamacare, the biggest way that the Affordable Care Act expanded the number of people who had insurance was to put millions of Americans on Medicaid. During the Obamacare debate, there was a proposal to allow people to buy into a federal insurance program like Medicare, the public option. But thanks to conservative Dem indies like Joe Lieberman, that died. The people who you keep hearing hate Obamacare tend to be the individual buyers because their coverage is still expensive because the pool isn't as big as it could be since Republicans fought the individual mandate, whose goal was to make the individual pool larger and, most importantly, healthier in order to get the cost down. But the people who got Medicaid, they tend to love Obamacare because before Obamacare, they were among the nearly 47 million people who had no insurance at all, a number that's now down to 27 million. And that's why Obamacare recipients tend to punish Republicans who try to take it away. Just ask Matt Bevin in Kentucky. But here's a question. What if the pool in Medicare was to grow from 43 million people to 317 million people, basically the ultimate big group? I mean, just like Social Security is basically tax-funded retirement funds, is a tax-funded retirement fund that covers all 317 million Americans. What if there was a form of publicly funded medical insurance that did the same thing? What would happen? When we come back, I will discuss that question, which is brand named Medicare for All, with an actual expert.
She has things in her plan that are just not realistic, but when you question it, she talks about it as, well, you just don't understand, or you're sounding like a Republican, which is a talking point that is used by the other party, not by us.
If anyone wants to defend keeping those high profits for insurance companies and those high profits for drug companies and not making the top 1% pay a fair share in taxes and not making corporations pay a fair share in taxes, then I think they're running in the wrong presidential primary.
Well, Democrats are having a little snipe fight about Medicare for all. But do you actually know what they're fighting about? Briefly, here are the facts. The moderates, like Biden and Klobuchar, say protect Obamacare from Republicans and keep improving it. Buttigieg has called adding a public option, like a second Medicare that people can choose if they want to, and Mayor Pete calls that Medicare for all who want it. Now there's option 2, which is Medicare for all, which is at the center of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's campaigns. Now, there's been much hand-wringing over how the country would pay for something like this, which has led Warren to release a detailed plan on just how she would fund universal single-payer health care. So, how will this affect your paycheck? Let's take a look. Okay, here's your paycheck. Oh, wow, you're doing really well. Under Medicare for All, this line, let's show this line that shows your insurance premium. Oh, here we go. We have to swipe it. Oh, there we go. Who shows your insurance premium. There it is. That would actually go away. As Rachel Maddow would say, poof. You can't see it here, but your employer's contribution also poof. So maybe your boss will pay that money to you instead as more salary. One can hope. And then this line, swiping again, the one that shows, there it is, that shows your Medicare and Medicaid taxes, that stays the same under Warren's plan. So would your federal income tax, because Warren's plan finds other ways to pay to put everyone on Medicare. So that line also stays the same. That's why you hear her saying that your costs would go down. More health care, more paycheck, and a tax on billionaires to pay for it all, which may be why some people are not a fan.
I've paid over $10 billion in taxes. I paid more than anyone in taxes. But I'm glad to have paid, if I'd had to pay $20 billion, it's fine. But, when you say I should pay $100 billion, okay, then I'm starting to do a little math about what I have left over. Sorry, I'm just kidding.
Okay, joining me now is Wendell Potter, president of Business for Medicare for All. Okay, so Mr. Potter, yeah, that was my sort of awkward way of trying to explain Medicare for All. But did I get that basically right? That
you did.
Essentially, the line where you're paying for the insurance premiums would go away.
That's correct.
And the company's portion of your insurance premiums would also go away. So in effect, at least under Warren's plan, you'd end up with more money.
You would end up with more money in your paycheck. That's one of the things that's been happening over time. And one of the reasons why people are noticing they're not getting very big raises is that the money that our employers would ordinarily give us in raises, maybe bonuses, is going to insurance companies instead.
Right.
One of the things that people don't realize is insurance companies don't really control health care costs. And they don't really want to, because as health care costs go up, so do premiums.
Right.
That means they get more money from us to convert to profit. So they have an incentive not to control health care costs. The average premium for a family now is $20,000 for a policy that you get through the workplace.
Right.
I was looking just a few weeks ago to what it was in 1993 when the Clintons were trying to reform the health care system. It was less than $500. Now it's more than $20,500.
And if you think about it, because we don't see the majority of the premium, most of the company is paying it, as you said, instead of giving us more paycheck, they're paying that premium sort of behind the scenes. We just see that one line, which is actually pretty high. If I have a family plan, there are 5 people on our plan, so it's pretty high. It's still pretty high. But most people, about 76% of people still like that system. Like 83% of people like Medicare. Can you explain why Medicare, my explanation for it in the previous blog was that because Medicare has so many people in one pool, these sort of economies of scale make everything cheaper. Is that correct?
You're exactly right. And one of the reasons why people are more happy or happier on Medicare is because they get better service, for one thing, and their costs are typically lower. On the private side, it's an entirely different picture. You have even the biggest insurance companies like United and Cigna and Humana that I used to work for. They're fairly big, but they don't have anywhere close to the size of that pool.
Right.
And they don't have the ability to control health care costs as a consequence.
If you put all 317, and up million Americans in one pool, and then they bought Medicare and bought medical services that way, would the cost of American health care go down?
It would, and that's a very important point, because a lot of the candidates talk about we need to get to universal coverage, which is an important goal, and it was the ultimate goal 10 years ago when we saw the Affordable Care Act being enacted. But what Congress did not do then was really in an effective way control health care costs. And it's been going up and up and up. 10 years ago, we spent about $2.5 trillion in health care. This year, it's over $3.5 trillion.
Yeah.
So that just shows you that the current system is not controlling health care costs. Medicare does an exceedingly better job of controlling health care costs, and the administrative costs of Medicare are far, far lower, too.
Why are people then, you think, so afraid of the idea? Because single payer just means what Medicare is. It just means one payer. But people get freaked out by it. Why do you think that is?
They get freaked out because of the fear-mongering campaign that I used to be a part of. In my old job, I used to be a part of the effort to scare people away from Medicare for all or from any kind of reforms that might have a detrimental effect on industry profits. We've done that, or they've done that. It's been a continuing process for a long time. I've often said that what we're seeing now is the mother of all propaganda campaigns to scare people. And people are afraid of change generally.
Yeah.
And that we grew up with this system. It's something that we've been accustomed to. And as you noted, a lot of what's going on is not too transparent.
Yeah.
We're not too much aware of what's going on.
If a Medicare for all system were to pass, could you still buy private insurance, like Aflac kind of insurance?
You could, if it's for something that's not already covered. For extra stuff. And they do that in the UK. They do it in Canada. So it is the point that, or the argument that health insurance companies would just drive and blow away is not true.
Yeah. And my last question to you would be, because people freaked out a little bit when Elizabeth Warren released the actual cost of her plan. Is the cost that she put forward less than what we're paying right now for her?
It absolutely is.
It is less.
It would be less the moment it takes place, and over years it would cost us a lot less because it has price control mechanisms in it.
Right, right. Yeah. It's really important, I think, to get just the basics out, so people understand what it is. It isn't this amorphous thing, universal health care. It's actually just what your grandparents have. It's Medicare, but you'd have it too.
You'd have it, and it'd be better for you. You'd have more things covered, and it would cost less.
Yeah.
It's improved and expanded Medicare, not just Medicare.
My last question to you then, because the Affordable Care Act, I still remember, I still have flashbacks to the hell it was to pass that bill. It seems in a lot of ways doing health care politically is kind of suicidal.
It's hard.
It's hard to do. Do you think something, well, we'll put aside the politics of whether it could pass. Could the same outcome be achieved by simply making improvements to the Affordable Care Act, like adding a Medicare option under the Affordable Care Act?
No, 10 years ago, I was an advocate of the public option because that was the best we could do.
Yeah.
But the fundamental structure of our system is broken and flawed. It's collapsing.
Yeah.
You cannot build on that. It's time to put that on to the ash heap of history. It does not work anymore.
I'll tell you what, having a close-up of the healthcare industry, if there was just one system, and from when you go to one hospital versus another, it was the same system, it would be a lot more efficient. It definitely would be that. Wendell Potter, you are the perfect person to talk to about this. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.